propaganda to be like, look, help, we're being attacked. Oh, the cops are after us. Greg Abbott just did them the biggest favor imaginable by saying anti-Semitic.
Are you sure about that?
If hundreds of them are committing crimes at once, then arrest hundreds of them, put them in buses and take them to jail. Very simple. And I've been clear about my feelings on that subject. But right now, I have a bone to pick with the other side of this dispute. And before we get to the more significant problem, I will, first of all, confess some annoyance at some of the people who have been so...
Before we get started on this, I want to go ahead and say this right now. There is the question of anti-whiteness. There is also the question of hate speech versus actual speech itself. There is that question there. But for the most part, for this video here, I'm going to be keeping it on the topic of protest and protest alone, because the next thing you know, you guys know me, I'm just going to be going into this tangent and that tangent there. But I want to focus primarily on the protest and why it is that this notion that these protests or this whole topic of arresting protesters may help the left. But obviously you guys are seeing that, of course, this is not the same as what it was back in 2020. And of course, given the fact that it's not the same as 2020, it does, however, have a much more, I would say it has a very, very similar ring to it, and obviously it's going to be an opportunity for some, but we'll be discussing that portion of this video here. As far as hate speech, anti-whiteness, and all the other things that you might would expect to come along with this, that right there will be done later on this year when we get into much heavier topics, because we obviously have to explore that and why it is that the left loves to use the trope of anti-whiteness. But that right there will come up in other videos. I want to keep it on the topic of protest for this video right here specific, and of course the situation involving Matt Walsh and why it is that people are questioning whether he's going to keep his job at the Daily Wire or not. But stick around. So once again, there's a lot of crap here and not enough shovels. So let's just ask the question, will this help the left? Now, it took me a second to get that out, because I'm pretty sure some of you guys who are watching this video are probably thinking the exact same thing. You're looking at all these protests, and of course, I'm showing you a lot of random imagery of these protests, which, by the way, some of these are in Italy. Some of these are at University of Texas, Austin. Some of these, of course, are still in New York on the NYU campus. And, of course, some of these are also at the Columbia campus. And some of these are also going on in even Harlem and pretty much anywhere and everywhere I could find these clips at online. They're pretty much everywhere. And, of course, there's also encampments. And, of course, like my previous video, we asked the question, will this right here turn into another Chaz? And I responded by simply saying that because the fact it's an election year, you would probably think that that was the case. But the problem is the left has not got Trump in office to try to get out. And, of course, you also don't have the mayors actively helping with these situations. And, of course, the funding for these protests, I'm pretty sure they're coming from somewhere that we're not allowed to mention. But don't worry, we'll definitely talk about that more in Sunday's video, which, of course, will be about, let's just say, asking the question whether America will remain pro-Israel. But still, at the same time, though, we got to talk about this issue here. And for whatever reason, we've got people out there asking the question if Matt Walsh is the next person from the Daily Wire to get fired. Mostly due to the fact that he's kind of speaking out against Governor Greg Abbott, who put some, well, let me just show you. Really quick, I need to go ahead and say this before we really dive into it. A lot of the footage that you're seeing will be recycled for the video that comes out on Sunday, because obviously we're going to have a lot more footage, especially from these riots and things that are going on, these protests. I know it's kind of a little bit of a stretch to call them a riot yet, but given the fact that a lot of people are getting arrested, a lot of obstructions going on, I'm pretty sure we can say that we're close to that particular, let's just say I'm pretty sure we're close to that phrase being used to describe everything, but let's continue. That's the scene at University of Texas, Austin. And also something else too, there's also this other piece of footage out there where this guy got arrested and apparently he had a lizard or an iguana or something with him. It's kind of a funny image, but of course people are obviously getting arrested during these protests. And I'm here to tell you right now that I don't think that anybody wants this to turn into George Floyd 2.0, which of course will come up over the course of this video, because I think it's pretty obvious that everybody knows by now that race wars occur once every 4 years. It's normally an election year, and they're normally driven by the left to bring up the whole racial grievance narrative. But something else too needs to be said. And it's something that, quite frankly, I said in the very first part. And that was the question that people are asking: is Matt Walsh the next person to get fired? Because Matt Walsh dare ask a question about this, basically say that, look, don't go too far in this situation in the name of anti-Semitism. And I'm here to tell you right now, he's probably not going to get fired, unlike Candace got fired. But I'll be touching on Candace over the course of this video as well, so make sure you guys stick around for the full piece, because we got a lot to talk about here. So this first pile of goo or crap that we need to kind of shovel is this nonsense around Matt Walsh. I want to go ahead and kind of address this first, because obviously this right here is kind of the meat of the entire situation, because obviously people are asking the question if this right here will be George Floyd 2.0. Anytime you see something that happens online, somebody gets arrested, or somebody gets into a fight with a cop, or somebody who gets injured, or they die as a result of something that they quite frankly did that was stupid, people automatically jump to the conclusion that we're going to have another George Floyd situation on our hands. Let me go ahead and say this before we go any further, though, because this video was originally supposed to be something else, and it just got it just got longer than it needed to be. I want to go ahead and say this. When the situation happened with George Floyd, everybody in the country obviously looked at that and said that that right there is pretty daggone screwed up. People got pissed off. People got upset. And, of course, to go on top of this, in some cases, people voted Democrat out of solidarity with people who felt they may have been wronged. Me, I saw through the BS right away, and, of course, my opinions did not change at all. But, of course, that does not mean that my Facebook feed was not full of black squares. Everybody had a black square in their profile picture after what happened. Of course, days later, weeks later, we find out that George Floyd was no longer George Floyd, and he was actually Fentanyl Floyd, and he was full of fentanyl. And also we found that he had lied about his mother dying, and we found out that he had an extremely shady past. And then later on we found out that Mr. Chauvin was actually using what was actually a standardized technique. Now, whether you can agree with that technique or not, that right there is up to you. But I advise you guys watch the documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis. It is available for free here on YouTube. I advise you guys watch it from start to finish. It's pretty much everything we had suspected was going to happen, did in fact happen, and did in fact occur. But still, though, that leaves the question, will this right here turn into George Floyd 2.0? Well, let me go ahead and say this before I play this first half of what Walsh said the day after he was criticized online, and many people thought that this right here was just his way of saying, look, my bad, I screwed up, talking to the Daily Wire, which, by the way, I don't think it was. I think it was just Matt Walsh trying to re-clarify what he had said the previous day, and that is this here. Like I've said already, and I say this in many videos, and I've probably said it already again, every 4 years there's race wars, because obviously the left needs something to campaign on, because quite frankly they never have anything to campaign on, because their ideas are absolutely horrible. So therefore you're going to get a bunch of racial grievances. Let's go ahead and cue this.
Arguing that these protests are BLM reborn. There was always destined to be some kind of race-related protest movement in the spring and summer before the election. In 2020, it was George Floyd. This time around, it's taken the form of sympathizing with Hamas. But at bottom, it's the same people, the same activists, funded by the same wealthy backers who, just as in 2020, can ultimately be traced back to George Soros, who else? And they're angry about basically the same things, many of them. Even if the conflict in Israel has nothing at all to do with racial grievances in the U.S., these activists, and the left more broadly, are still viewing it through that prism. They see Hamas as revolutionaries fighting back against white power structures and white colonialism. They see this as marginalized brown people warring against white oppressors. It's all about systemic racism. Everything is always about that. As I've said many times, they will always side with the less white side, or the browner side, if that's how you want to put it.
100% true, 100% spot on. I'm not the biggest fan of Matt Walsh, but I do have to agree with him on this one here. I probably should have said that earlier, so that way you guys didn't get the impression that I'm simping for Walsh. Believe me when I tell you I do have issues with him. I agree with Ben Shapiro, for example, on about 90-some-odd% of the issues, but to tell you the truth, I really and truly don't care for him that much as a person. I think the mask has slipped. It slipped a long time ago. And of course, I just did a video on Tucker Carlson, which I'll link in the description box, and his take on UFOs and his take on nuclear weapons. And of course, I kind of agree with his take on UFOs, but definitely not on nuclear weapons. But I'll leave it in the description box for you guys to check out. Not to mention the much more expansive version from Gear Issue 33 in the comment section. I advise you guys to go check that out. That's where I do my more military-related type of content. The point is this right here. You can have disagreements with people and you can agree with people. And of course, you can also highlight where they're right and where they're wrong at. The point is this right here. About this particular situation, the left typically tends to do this, especially the far left. Anything that's white or anything that looks close to white, they're going to automatically be against. Also, these protesters, these Free Palestine protesters, they are screaming no to Zionism, yet you've also got people who are protesting alongside them who are anti-Zionistic Jews. I have to tread lightly because of YouTube's terms of services, but of course, the kind of falls into different categories. You have non-religious Jews who typically tend to be atheists. A lot of them are actually on the left, but they're still obviously pro-Israel. They want peace. They typically tend to vote Democrat. Then, of course, you've got more kosher, which is like Ben Shapiro, somebody who actually adheres to Judaism. You've got a lot of those, and of course, you've also got Zionists, and of course, you've also got Messianic Jews, who are Jews who, quite frankly, follow Jesus Christ and are Christians. A great example of this would be Minister Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. I listen to Jonathan Cahn from time to time. Coincidentally, located in the state of New Jersey, he does not hide that, and of course, the country of Israel is about the same size as the state of New Jersey. I just figured I'd go ahead and point that out. But obviously, this right here is going to be an opportunity for people to jump in and start doing the whole race grift once again. The question, however, is, will it work this time around? Some answers are a little bit more obvious than you might would think, but we'll get to that on the other side once we look at the other half of what Mr. Walsh had to say.
So I'm not a fan of these people or their movement. In fact, I despise everything they stand for. And I've also said, including just yesterday, that any protester breaking the law should be rounded up and dragged away in handcuffs immediately. Throw the book at any of the lawbreakers. If they're setting up illegal encampments, if they're vandalizing or causing any property damage at all, if they're engaging in any acts of violence at all, if they're making explicit threats of violence against Jewish people or any other group of people, if they're standing in the road and blocking traffic, if they're engaging in criminal activity of any kind, they should be thrown in jail. And if hundreds of them are committing crimes at once, then arrest hundreds of them, put them in buses and take them to jail. Very simple. And I've been clear about my feelings on that subject. But right now, I have a bone to pick with the other side of this dispute. And before we get to the more significant problem, I will, first of all, confess some annoyance at some of the people who have been so...
I took what Walsh was saying for the most part as the rational take on this situation. You can protest, yeah, as long as you keep it within the guidelines of the school itself. But there's something that needs to be said about that tweet that Greg Abbott had. And of course, I'm going to be answering that after you guys see this next clip, because one of Matt Walsh's mortal enemies has decided to chime in, and I wouldn't say it's actually the best response.
Not looking at what's going on in America, in this country. And ultimately, that's what I care about, and that's what it would look like Matt Walsh cares about. And, you know, I don't know, again, you see Greg Abbott, arrests being made right now and will continue until the crowd disperses. These protesters belong in jail. No. You get to protest. You get to say uncomfortable things, racist things. You're protected by the First Amendment to say those things. I don't support that, but it doesn't matter. That's what our First Amendment protects. And when you have weirdos like Wheelie McAbbott here going out and saying, well, they belong in jail. They belong in jail for trespassing, breaking the law, whatever they did to break the law, not for anti-Semitism. That's not illegal. Let me know what you think in the comment section.
I want to say this really quick. I like Jeremy at the Quartering. I like him as a person. I think that Jeremy is a person who, quite frankly, let's be honest, we all know he's a grifter. He knows he's a grifter. Pretty much everybody on the internet's a grifter to a certain extent. The term gets thrown around like crazy. Let's just go ahead and be honest. This is not a take that I fully agree with, but I do understand his concerns. There's obviously a lot of things that, for the most part, I do agree with. As long as you're not arresting people over freedom of speech, then okay, but there's a problem there, dude. When does freedom of speech, when does protest, which, by the way, is covered under the First Amendment, when does that become a riot? When does that become chaos? I think that that's what Greg Abbott is doing, is he's trying to ward off against chaos. I need to go ahead and say this really quick before we get back on topic. During the George Floyd riots, the first couple of days, like after that incident, most of the protests, while there were a lot of angry people there, For the most part, the protests were relatively peaceful. What happened is that outside influences got involved and stirred things up with inside influences, and next thing you know, it turned into absolute chaos. The same thing happened in Atlanta. The same thing would eventually, in Wisconsin with the Jacob Blake situation, it was a little bit more of a straight-up riot, but a lot of these protests were just straight-up protests that were funded, of course, by outside sources. I'm not going to say who because you might get removed. But the thing is this right here, after a while, they got stirred up, and the next thing you know, they turned into riots. They turned into countrywide riots. And, of course, in one city, it turned into a Capitol Hill autonomous zone situation. And, of course, the city of Portland, Oregon has always been a crap hole, and it's always been a hellscape. It just got way, way worse. I think what people are trying to ward against the possibility of riots again this year. And nobody wants these riots. I think a lot of people have actually learned from this, and they've probably found a way to prepare themselves for the next round should they show up. Fact of the matter is, like I've said before, once every 4 years, presidential elections, race wars happen, and this right here is their vehicle to do it. I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this video and you probably thought to yourself, well, why in the world would the Free Palestine situation turn into a grievance for other racial groups and other identity politics groups? Because they always do! During the George Floyd situation, during those riots, you saw a bunch of rainbow flags. Now the rainbow community can come out and protest and raise hell. You saw flags that represented other races and whatnot. Okay, why do you think that the rainbow flag got changed and has so many different colors on it? Because they want to include everybody who felt they were oppressed, including some of the worst people on this earth that should be locked up away from society. This is what they do. This is how they do it. Okay, and normally when they do it, they try to use this as an opportunity to manipulate people's emotions and manipulating them into voting however they want. This is kind of what they do. This is kind of how these people are. All right? So, if you're upset right now that Greg Abbott is possibly going to arrest people down in Texas, or if the cops in New York are going to arrest people, and of course the term anti-Semitism gets thrown out there because obviously it's going to be used, then I got a bridge to sell you somewhere if you don't think that's going to happen, because guess what? It's going to happen. It's going to be all over the place. But there's something I need to say really quick about manipulation, of course, and how it was that people manipulate votes and how it is that people can manipulate this situation to be a positive. And my response to that there, and I'll explain in a second, is that I don't see how the hell you're going to be able to manipulate this. I am not the biggest Christopher Rufo fan in the world. Of course, he's part of Con Inc. He's very, very good on CRT, but he hasn't really posted a whole lot recently. But he definitely put out a good take recently, which I'm playing for you guys right now. I'm showing you guys in the B-roll footage. You guys know me. I don't read everything verbatim, but I'm basically going to kind of bullet down to this right here. He basically went out of his way to explain that the Israel-Gaza conflict is a situation that 90% of the voter base doesn't really and truly know that much about, meaning in detail. People know about Israel. People know about Palestinians. People know about the Middle East. They know that the Middle East is chaotic. They know that the Jews and the Palestinians don't get along. They know that Jews and Muslims hate one another. They know that there, but they don't know the absolute specifics of said conflict. At the end of the day, it always comes back to what I said in one of my first videos on this very topic, is it always comes down to who threw the first rock. Basically meaning that if you threw the first rock, which by the way was the Palestinians, it was Hamas who threw the first rock, you were then subject to getting your ass kicked. Now, some people will then turn right back around and say that what Israel is doing is a genocide. However, the problem is this right here. Genocide is another buzzword for war. This is not a genocide that's going on. It's a war. It's a terrible war. It's a god-awful war, and a lot of innocent people are getting killed. However, I also know through personal experience, having served in combat in that region in the Middle East, I know what these people do. One of the things that really pissed me off when this whole thing first started was when people were putting out there all kinds of tweets saying, "Oh my God, look at the IDF. Look at what they're doing. They're stripping this guy naked." Yeah, it's called a strip search, dude. It's called a search. You search them. You strip them down, make sure they don't have anything on them they can use against you. These people make improvised explosives and place them in their rectum. They will kill you and kill their own child to kill you. That's who these people are. Do us a favor and shut the hell up, because you're not helping. That's the truth. Okay, moving on. Here's the thing about this situation here. Most people in the United States are going to look at this situation, and they're going to look at the racial grievances, and what they're going to do is they're automatically going to associate those who are basically trying to express their racial grievances. And what they're going to say is this here: "Oh my God, they've linked up with the freaking terrorists. That's what most people are going to say. So no, it's not a gift to the left. As a matter of fact, if anything, there's a lot of people out there who are screaming, shut this entire thing down, because these college students, whom, by the way, Joe Biden is looking to bail out this year by forgiving student loan debt, which, by the way, many parents right now are going to be pretty daggone pissed off about. Yeah, if anything, it's going to hurt the left a lot more than you ever think it could be. So stop thinking for 2 seconds that this right here is a gift to the left.
Issue that really breaks down along party lines the way that issues we tend to see mass protests about too. So for example, back in 2020, when you had the BLM riots happening, the reality is basically all of the Democratic Party, anti-establishment and pro-establishment, was totally in favor of that movement. When it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, that breaks down not so much along party lines, but along establishment versus anti-establishment lines. And so Joe Biden can't really say a whole lot about this without alienating a large fraction of his voter base. And so if this does end up becoming violent, there's a question, there's a question of whether law and order is going to be enforced or whether they're not allowed to be violent. Because we know if the Democratic Party sided with them, or the Democratic Party in its totality sided with them, they would literally be able to do whatever they wanted.
He also said in that round of tweets that they're going to use this to manipulate. Well, you're not going to be able to manipulate this one, okay? You're just not going to be able to manipulate people's emotions. Because, as I said earlier, most people see these pro-Palestinian flags and they automatically equate that these right here are the people who chant death to America, the people that we've seen on the news chanting death to America. It's not going to work. And of course, this right is happening on a Democrat president's watch, whom, by the way, has got a national convention where this same issue is going to be on the ballot and on the platform of which way to go. If Biden goes pro-Israel, which, by the way, he's trying to play both sides, it's not going to work. The pro-Palestine side, the pro-Hamas side, they're going to get pissed off and they're going to abandon him. And they're probably going to destroy the place. If he leans pro-Hamas or pro-Palestine, all the AIPAC money goes to Donald Trump. All right? But this weak, pathetic, old fart, because that right there is what he is, worst president in American history, definitely the weakest, he's trying to play both sides. So if he plays both sides or tries to play both sides, what's going to happen is he's going to lose the AIPAC money, and then to go on top of that, he's also going to lose the Free Palestine side, mostly college kids, and that also includes a lot of minorities, meaning he gets absolutely destroyed this year in a landslide. And that, my friends, is why this situation is not a gift to the left. I want to end the video on this note right here. Okay, I played a piece of a bit on Timcast IRL to start this off with, and of course people were saying, this right here could be a gift to the left, and I basically said, are you sure about that, to start things off with? And of course I had a lot of things I wanted to talk about in this video to kind of get to this point. Tim Pool, I reference from time to time, and the Beanie Guy's okay, in my opinion. I think he's a smart guy, but I also think he has a lot more to learn. And of course, like I've always said, riots don't ever help the incumbent party, which is being controlled by the left. It actually hurts. I mean, 1968 riots, Democrat president, Democrat incumbent party, Nixon won. 1992 LA riots, Republican in office, Democrat won. 2016, Democrat in office. You had all those riots that year, Republican won. 2020, all the riots that happened, Republican in office, Democrat won. That's the truth about riots, okay? This issue does not help the left at all. But please tell me what you think in the comment section. I would love to get you guys' thoughts on this, and I'll see you guys later.